When Nico called me and asked me to come out and speak, I'm like, where's the conference? And he goes, well, I'm assuming it's in BC. And he said, Vancouver. And I'm like, absolutely, I'm all in. So when I ran into him this morning, he apologized for the weather because it's very stereotypical Vancouver today. But he didn't, well, I told him, I said, I came out a little bit early. So I came out on Saturday, and I thought I'm going to turn this into a bit of vacation as well as a bit of business. So I was in Kelowna the last couple of days, and I have a colleague that just moved to Kelowna, and I hooked up with her and her husband, and they're extreme sports fanatics, and we actually went mountain biking in the mountains of Kelowna. So I am so glad to be standing here with all bones intact and no bruises, because we were going down extreme terrain. I do have really cut up shins and stuff like that from those from the branches and stuff like that. So if I'm wearing shorts, you'd know that I went mountain bike. But other than that, I'm pretty much under control for that. So anyway, so I want to thank again for having us here today to talk about probably the number one issue that is facing our industry right now, and that's growth. And I get an opportunity to speak to a lot of our clients, whether it's manufacturers, retailers, industry association, and everyone is just looking for growth. And that's something that we're seeing around the world. What's happening right now is developed markets such as Canada, US, and even parts of Europe are relatively static when it comes to growth. And really it's the emerging markets where we're seeing a lot of growth. And obviously you're familiar with that, with the growth of the Asia Pacific and the proximity to Vancouver as well. And you see the influx of consumers coming in. So first of all, that's kind of what we're going to talk about, is where are those opportunities we see for growth that you need to be thinking about today, 5 years, 10 years out, because things are going to be changing. We're starting to see it impact our industry right now. So first of all, before I get into that, just to familiarize yourself with who Nielsen is, and my mom still thinks I work for a dairy company. So in Ontario, Nielsen's a big dairy manufacturer owned by the Loblaws Corp. So I keep, no, Mom, it's not that. So Nielsen, basically, to simplify what we do, we track what consumers buy and what consumers watch. So on the Nielsen side, we have the Nielsen Media, and we heard of maybe Nielsen Ratings. But basically, we capture the point of sale information from retailers. So we have cooperation from most of the retailers in Canada, and we bring in that information store by store level. We aggregate it, make a big database, so we're able to track those trends. We also have a consumer panel of about 10,000 households in Canada, and from that we monitor their shopping behavior. So, think Big Brother's watching, well, Nielsen's Big Brother, and we're watching what our consumers are doing as well. So they have handheld scanners, they track all their purchases, but we also have the benefit of surveying them, asking them what matters, what makes it tick for them, and they're able to integrate what consumers are doing versus what they say they're going to do, and understand those attitudes and make that connection. So really that's the two areas that we're going to be focusing on today, is how the trends are happening, what consumers are saying and what they're wanting, and what are those other big trends we have to watch out for as well. So we think about the last couple years, we've been on a bit of a journey, both as manufacturers, both as retailers, and also as consumers. And just think about before the recession, we are different consumers today than we were before. So a lot of times people say, oh, I can't wait for things to get back to the way it was in 2008 when, things were growing and we didn't have all this value-driven consumer. You know what? But, things have changed, and things have changed permanently. We're not going back to the way things were. So before we get into the Nielsen point of view, let's understand where we see our market going from an overall perspective. So this is some Stats Canada information looking at GDP growth within Canada. And you can really see the impact of the recession in 2009. The market contracted about 2.5 points. We rebounded fairly quickly. And Canada was leading a lot of the G8 growth. We're outperforming our neighbor to the south quite drastically. But look at 2012. We finished the year with only about a 2% growth. So once again, growth is starting to slow down. And the other concern that we see moving forward is that, once again, we're not seeing a lot of growth expectations for the future as well. So 2013, how are we going to do? It's probably going to be another repeat year as far as from a growth perspective. They're forecasting only about 2% growth for this year. Even if you go at about 5 years to 2017, still only about 2.5% growth. So kind of flatlining from a GDP perspective. Now the US is a different perspective. They're showing growth probably about 3 to 3.5, because they're taking longer to recover from the recession. They're going to probably outpace Canada from a growth perspective for the next few years. Now, at Nielsen, we do a consumer confidence index. Now, you're probably going, what's that? So basically, I saw Nico on the street and say, hey, Nico, how are you doing? He goes, well, I'm fine, thanks. That's a very neutral response. So think about, a fine being 100 when you come to consumer confidence. So if you look at consumer confidence in Canada versus the US, it really is the tale of two economies right now. Canadians are feeling way more confident than the US. Even when the recession hit, we were feeling a little bit more confident than the US. We rebounded very quickly. We were feeling bullish about our job creation and things like that. We didn't get hit as hard from the US, but last couple of years, in basically last part of 2011, early part of 2012, things kind of softened a little bit. We were kind of, realized probably we were a little bit too optimistic, and now we're starting to see that optimism grow a little bit more. So we're sitting right now at 102. So how are Canadians feeling? We're feeling fine, but once again, not the way we were before the recession. So we still have this cautious consumer out there. Good news for us as well, because we're a big trading partner with the U.S. The U.S. is starting to see some momentum there, about a 93 index. So still a lot of work to do south of the border, but at least it's starting to move in the right direction, which should benefit us as well. So how does Canada rank? So like I said, we survey on a quarterly basis consumer confidence across 58 countries. So how does Canada sit in the global perspective? Well, we're ranked number 11 within this list. And you can just go through the top, no surprise if you kind of read the news or are aware of global economics, what's happening around the world. Indonesia, India, Philippines, it's a lot of those emerging markets and Asian markets that are showing a lot of optimism and growth right now. And that's where obviously you see a lot of investment that's moving as well. But we're ranked number 11. You can see how far the U.S. is down, ranked number 20. So what we see right now is, even though we have this consumer confidence, it's a bit of an uptick, and we're seeing a little bit of momentum here, we still have a consumer that is very much focused on spending control, and they are very, very cautious with how they're spending their money right now. So we asked Canadians, and this is our result of our survey as well, and we said, well, if you have some spare cash, what are you going to do with it? So if you go down, you can either spend it or you save it. Those are the two options you have, And so right now, if you just kind of focus on the saving strategies, the green there, it's that what we see is that Canadians are really focused on the balance sheet right now. They're paying off debts. They're putting money into savings. That's what the most of us are doing with any type of spare cash right now. Where, and if we want to spend a little bit of money, we're going on vacation, maybe buying a little bit of clothes and stuff like that, but really we're being very, very tight with how we're spending our money, which is also reflective of the fact that we see GDP growth relatively flat. Retail sales in Canada is relatively flat as well. So people aren't going out and spending more. They're being very, very careful of how they spend that hard-earned money. Here's the other interesting fact as well. When we ask consumers, well, what are you going to do with your spare cash? And they say, well, I don't have any spare cash. So 20% of Canadians don't have any spare cash. So what does that mean? We're living paycheck to paycheck, what means that's very, very vulnerable, to rising prices, inflation, is also interest rates and things like that. So more Canadians than global average don't have any spare cash, and compare that to the U.S. The U.S. is even in a worse situation. Over 30% of them don't have any spare cash as well. So think about 1 in 5 consumers out there just don't have any extra money at the end of the month. And obviously that's going to continue to fuel that need for spending restraint and also bang for the buck and value. So what are the top concerns? So we asked Canadians a whole slew of things. So we have a list, probably about 30 or so things, everything from global warming to terrorism to the environment. And we say pick your number 1 concern and pick your number 2 concern of that list. And we aggregate them together and we kind of get an indication of what are consumers worried about? What is keeping them up at night? And no surprise, debt is the number 1 concern of Canadians. Now remember when we had the spare cash, what we're going to do? We're going to pay off debt. Well, this is why we're starting to see Canadians are using that spare cash to pay off debt, because it's the top concern that they see. Canadians right now are concerned about the debt load that they currently have. Economy is still on the list. Job security is still up there as well. So even though we have good job creation in Canada right now, unemployment's about 7.5 or 7.2% right now. We had a good month last month where we had a lot of job creation. But if you look at the 3-month average, it's kind of normalized a little bit. So that was kind of a blip in the research from the job creation perspective. But we're still not feeling that optimistic about even those who have jobs as well. So still a lot of uncertainty around that. Health is interesting because health is number 5, and it's always been number 1 until that recession hit. And then you can just see the concern over our health is more focused on the health of our wallets and the health of our bodies right now. And that's just the nature of this new consumer that we have. So let's talk about debt. And why is debt so important? Well, the reason why debt's so important because the household balance sheet isn't improving. So there's a bit of mixed messages here. If you looked at the average household income in Canada, we are earning more money as Canadians. So we're just a little bit shy of $47,000 is the average personal income in Canada. We're actually earning more, up 3%. Now, I didn't get a 3% raise last year, but once again, keep in mind that it's a function of more people are working. So we are creating jobs, and it's good quality jobs as far as full-time work. So that's what's fueling that 3% growth. But look at the growth from just 5 years out. So we're up about 14%. So what's wrong? We're making more money. What's going on? Well, the issue is that we have this debt-to-income ratio that just becomes really, really polarizing and really, handcuffing the consumer right now. So right now it's sitting at 1,646. Now you're kind of going, what does that mean? So to put it in simple terms, for every dollar I make, I actually owe $1.65 if I round it up. Okay? So that's what's really holding consumers cautious right now from a spending perspective, is that they've taken on so much debt. And you can just see where it was versus 2007, it's gone up substantially. So our debts are increasing at a faster rate than our incomes, which, you know, we know from a government perspective, you can't run a government when your expenses are higher than your costs, and that's what we see from a revenue perspective. That's what we see from a household perspective too. If you compare Canada debt to income ratio in the US right now, it's 1.35. So Canadians are carrying more debt than our US neighbors as well. Part of that reason why we've carried so much debt is because of real estate values and things like that. And you know, if you live in Vancouver, I'm very much aware how your real estate prices have inflated over the last number of years. I live in Toronto, and same thing there as well. Yeah, I'm very asset rich on paper, but that's about it, right? And basically what we've seen is consumers have used their homes as an ATM machine. We're going out buying against the equity in our home to invest in other things. But you know, that's why the government a couple of years ago have tightened up the rules on it, how much you can borrow. Your amortization has changed because they see this as also being the #1 threat of Canadian spending power for the economy moving forward, is that debt. Interest rates are very low today, but we know the way it works. What goes down eventually is going to go back up, and it's really going to hit consumers hard in the future as well. So also what we see too is this consumer that, you know, from a mind-spec perspective, consumer perception has to be our reality. So we also ask consumers, do you still think we're in the recession? You know, if you ask an economist, they said we haven't been in a recession since June 2009. If you ask a consumer, we still have about 50% of Canadians that still think we're in a recession. Okay? So once again, we may not have that perspective in the room here, but you have to keep in mind that your customers, your consumers, people who are buying your products do have that perspective. Almost half of Canadians still think we're knee deep in the recession. So that's going to dictate how they shop, where they shop, how they spend that money, because that's the uncertainty that we see with Canadians right now. And it's been hovering about that 50% for the last year or so it hasn't been changing that much over the last 3.5 years. So what we see right now is this is the new normal. Right? We have half of the consumers, they're just really uncertain, and this is the new, the rules of the game that we're starting to see within our industries. A lot of uncertainty and a lot of consumers worried about the future as well. So what's been this impact on consumer packaged goods? So as I talked about with Nielsen, we track consumer products moving out of grocery stores, drugstores, mass merchandisers, warehouse clubs, etc. And from there we can track how the Canadian marketplace is performing. So what we've seen is that this cautious consumer and this change in behavior and attitude has really had an impact on our industry. Basically what it's done, it's just sucked a lot of dollars out of the industry. We're not growing the same way that we used to. Typically, our industry saw anywhere from 4 to 5% dollar growth every year. Well, because we had some innovation, we would take prices up. You know, commodity price, we always use that as a reason for taking prices up as well, gas price, etc. So we always had inflation that was fueling growth within our industry, because population is only growing about 1.25% per year, right? So if you're going to grow your business, you either have to get people to put more stuff in their shopping basket or take prices up. And we've done that historically, we've done both. But what we've seen in the last couple of years is a really flattening of the marketplace. And 2012 was probably the worst performing year that we had in our industry. Only 2% growth on a dollar perspective. Units were flat. So that means people aren't putting more stuff into their shopping basket, they're making those discretionary trade-offs. So we're going to talk about some of those value drivers and why we're seeing only 2% growth coming up, because that's something that's going to continue to plague consumers. So once again, if I go to these conferences and I talk to manufacturers, I'll be at a manufacturer conference and they're up there, you know, rallying their troops and say, we're going to grow 6% this year. And, you know, I go to the next conference, we're going to grow 4%. And, you know, everyone's talking about growth, 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 but I'm sitting there going, but the market's flat. So at the end of the day, if you're going to grow, it's going to come at the expense of somebody else. And that's what we're starting to see in this new environment. It's becoming so competitive to win over that consumer share of wallet. So how does the regions perform in Canada? So we know from a Canadian perspective, growth is relatively static. And you can see it's a mixed bag if you look at the individual regions. But a couple of regions stick out here. Once again, Maritime's not doing that well. It's kind of relatively flat. You know, higher unemployment and things like that. And you can see if you looked at the unemployment rates within Canada, it's the prairies where they have the strong job creation as well. And that's where you see the industry really, really booming right now for us, about 4% on dollars, still getting inflationary growth. If you look at BC, once again, even a worse situation than we see from a national perspective. Dollars only up about 1%. And units are down about 1%. So a really, really static and flat market as we see in British Columbia. And Ontario is very similar to that. We're just starting to get a little bit more momentum there in Ontario, up about 2%. So it's really a tough market, and even more so in your backyard, it's becoming even more of a challenge for growth. We're going to talk about what are some of those factors that are influencing some of that declining market performance we see. So at Nielsen, we do have cooperation from a whole slew of retailers, and we do kind of look at overall performance of those individual channels. And this kind of gives you an indication of where consumers are spending their dollars from a channel perspective. Now, first thing, you look at that blue pie and you go, grocery plus mass, that's a big chunk. Why didn't you split it out? And unfortunately, we have, well, it's a mixed result here. So unfortunately, I can't split it out, but the good news is that we have people like Walmart that's cooperating. We just signed up Target, so Target Canada is part of our sample as well. But we have to protect their presence in the marketplace, and that's why it's merged in with the grocery guys in order to protect the visibility of those two cooperating retailers. So that's why it's such a big component of the market. But if we just focused in on that for a second and said, well, grocery mass is up 2%. But I'll tell you this, Walmart, they probably increased their store counts by about 15% in the last year. And Target, they're coming on strong. They've opened up the stores in Ontario. They're starting to move across the country as well. They have plans to open between 100 and 120 stores this year. And if you think about just Walmart, for example, they're probably growing anywhere from about 15% growth right now. So if you strip Walmart out of that mix right now, what that's telling me is the grocery guys are really, really hurting. And that's what we're finding right now. That's where the battleground is really being lost in our industry right now, is the center store, the grocery guys. People aren't shopping the same way they used to. We're not typically going to the same grocery stores that we used to. And what we're seeing is depression in trips. We're making fewer trips. That one-stop shop. I can now go to Walmart and buy, some meats and produce and things like that, and go to Costco and get really good meat and fruits and vegetables, which is something I couldn't do a few years ago. And that's something that I've changed my behaviors because of that as well. So that's what we're starting to see, is that food is a key driver regardless of what channel that we're looking at. And look at drug. Drug now is 11%. It's growing at 2%. But if you looked at drug sales and looked at food in isolation, drugstore sales, 20% of their sale is now food. And it was growing about a double-digit growth. Now it's about 7% growth on the food side. And it's interesting, if you look at the top 10 categories within a drugstore right now, guess what's number 9? You probably wouldn't think of that it would be number 9. Prescriptions? Well, you'd think that maybe prescriptions might be. Think about your past, your previous job. Milk. Or your current, yeah, so milk is the number 9 category right now in drugstores. So they're using that as a way of driving traffic and getting people in, because the milk is the most frequently purchased category, the number 1 category in our country, and it's what people buy the most. So that's a good way to bring people in. But if you look what's growing right now in drugstores, you'd kind of go, it's things like, butter, milk, eggs, ketchup, frozen pizza, and you're like going, what? That doesn't even look like a drugstore grocery list. But that's what drugstores have been able to do, is bring new consumers in, and as a result, yeah, I'm putting that milk in my bag, in my shopping cart, but I'm also shopping the store. I'm putting other things in as well. So it's been a huge growth driver for them too. And then the all other, which is a bit of a catch-all there, but the key growth there is Costco. The warehouse clubs are doing quite well. They've been able to buck the trend. They've been consistently growing on all metrics, more trips, bigger baskets, and more consumers are shopping there. And that's a different value proposition, obviously, for consumers. Very high-income households typically shop there on average. So it's those people with money that are looking for value by buying in bulk, and that's been a key driver. But things you have like dollar stores, we'll talk about the growth of that coming in, and things like Giant Tiger and stuff that have been gaining some momentum in our industry that are going to continue to grow in the few years as well. So now we're going to talk about what do we see are those 5 future growth areas. What are the things that you need to watch out for if you're looking for growth in this industry? So we talked about this consumer that's very uncertain. We're cautiously optimistic about the future. Yeah, we're feeling a little bit more confident, but we are being very cautious about our dollars. And as a result, we're going to figure out new ways to grow. And these are the things that we see are growth. So we're going to go through one of these at a time. And the first one we're going to talk about is value. Now, we've already kind of talked a little bit about value, but we're going to continue that conversation. So first of all, we ask Canadians, how many of you are trying to reduce your household expenses as a way to save money? Okay, that's just something we're trying to do. Now, it's a bit of a leading question. It's a little bit of an optimistic thing here that we're saying, are you trying to reduce your expenses if you're concerned about it? And 63% of us are saying yes. So that's aspirational. I want to reduce my expenses, but am I actually doing it? And the answer is yes. If we look at our consumer panel of household expenditures, it's actually down 2%. So people are actually spending less on consumer packaged goods. And it doesn't mean I'm buying less stuff, I'm just shopping smarter, right? So I can buy on sale, I can go to that store across the street that has a lower price point, I can price match, I can buy a cheaper brand or less expensive brand. So those are all the things that consumers have in their arsenal and their Swiss Army knife of value that they can choose in order to save, and as a result, we're seeing that they're spending 2% less. Once again, aspirational. They said they're going to spend less. How are you going to do it? So these are the motivators right now for consumers when they're looking to save money, and you probably can relate to all this. So once again, what are you going to do to save money? Well, I'm going to buy on sale. Whether I'm buying a suit, buying a car, or buying a bag of milk, or some grapes, I'm always looking for the best price, and that's the way of consumers are looking right now to save. And it's smart to save. That's something that, it's not about economies, it's about the fact that you're just being smart with your money. We're going to use coupons. It's number 2 on the list. And we've seen a huge explosion of coupon redemption rates in the last couple of years within Canada. So about 4.7% of all units are sold with a coupon right now, and that's up about 11% where it was a year ago. So consumers are actually doing what they said in this regard as well. They're using those coupons. We're going to do some homework as well. We're going to seek out those stores. We're going to buy those products. We're going to switch those stores that have a lower price. So consumers are willing to do the legwork in order to save some money as well. So that's what they said they're going to do. Actually, is it translating to overall sales right now? And the answer is yes. So what we see when we look at growth within our industry, even though it's very, very limited, it's all being fueled by value motivators. So think of all the retail sales dollars that go through the cash register. 36% of those sales are sold with a price cut. So that means there's some kind of reduction in price motivation that's causing consumers to buy. And think of those as your promoted feature prices that you see. So 36%. But here's the real kicker. 48% of the units are sold with a price cut. So think about that. Every time that scanner is beeping, almost half the time there's some kind of reduction in price that's motivating consumers to buy. And this has been creeping up quarter after quarter after quarter. And before the recession, that 36% was 27%. So we've seen a fundamental shift in how consumers are shopping and also how retailers, manufacturers are promoting their products more and more and more to get consumers to buy. And that's what's fueling a lot of the growth within our industry. We talked about the fact the industry is flat, only 2% growth from a dollar perspective. You looked at price cut sales, that TPR stands for temporary price reduction, it's a Nielsen term. It's up 6%. So right now, price cut sales are actually outpacing the market by 3 times. And if you looked at non-promoted sales, it's actually -1. So the things you sell day in, day out without the reduction in price is actually declining, and it's more about promotion, and that's what's driving a lot of the volume right now in our industry. So we talked about coupon activity, it's also up about 6%. Discount retailers also up about 6%. Discount retailer, it's a big term that we use, and we got retailer cooperation. So all the retailers that participate in Nielsen's point of sale information, we define them, we put them into 2 buckets, conventional or discount. So discount are those hard discount grocery guys, like, and also Walmart, the mass merchandise, Target goes in there as well. So that's how we've defined that industry, and it's up about 6%. And discount is going to continue to grow, and just look how much discount has grown in the last number of years. In the last 5 years, it's gained about 5 share points. So now they're about 39.4% of the Canadian marketplace. And they've gained about 5 share points, and that's worth about, I have to turn around and look there, it's worth about $3 billion. That's how much they've stolen from the Canadian marketplace right now. So discount's big, and it's going to continue to get bigger as we move into the future. Now, this is also a big threat for growing your business from a retail perspective, because guess what? Discounters sell at discounted prices. So every dollar that I buy or spend in discounters, it's probably about 15 to 20% less expensive, so that means that dollars are staying in my pocket versus going into the industry. And that's one of the contributing factors why we see an industry that's relatively static, because people are saving their money, shifting to the discount format. And we can expect more growth. So 2013, we're going to see share potentially about 43%, because all those Zellers locations that closed down, potentially a Walmart moved in there or a Target is opening, and that's going to continue to fuel dramatic growth within that sector. And then how big is it going to get? You know, by 2017, we're projecting about 50% of the Canadian marketplace will be going through the discount format. We're going to see this polarization potentially in the retail environment. It's going to be discount, probably then a shift to premium. Now you're probably going, well, 50%, that's huge, and it is huge. But in Ontario, we're at 49.7% right now that's discount. So the discount phenomenon that started in Ontario is like moving into other parts of Canada very, very aggressively with a lot of retailers. And if you look at some of the retailers that are expanding their footprint right now, it's either discount or it's those premium guys like Whole Foods, et cetera, that are opening more stores. So it's not the traditional grocery guys that are typically out there investing in more real estate. So that's where we're going to see the market continue to shift. So once again, you need to play in that sandbox and figure out your discount strategy. And we're now at the point where manufacturers are starting to figure out going, you know what, I'll use Tide as an example, right? Tide is Tide. So I can buy it at a premium retailer, I can buy it at a discount retailer, same product. It's hard to differentiate that. So even someone like P&G is sitting there going, maybe we need to come up with, here are the products we have for discount, here are the products we're going to offer for conventional or premium, and look for a way to potentially, prevent consumers from price comparing. Because consumers can't do math that well. They can't figure out, I can figure out 2 for $5, right, if you're doing that multiple thing, but I can't figure out 2 for $5.99. Well, some people can, but you can figure out it's $3. But, sometimes people just can't figure out the math. I should say 3 for $5. That was a better example. So 3 for $5, that was an example that people just can't figure out the math, right? And then if you look at the bottom of the print, sometimes it tells you what it is per unit, but sometimes people just don't figure that one out. So that's something that's going to continue to shift, and we're going to see more dollars shifting over the discount. So we need to figure out your strategy and make sure you don't ignore this, because if you do, you're not going to see the growth in your industry. The other trend we see is price matching on the grocery side. And this is a new survey we did, because you know what? A lot of retailers right now are saying, well, I don't want to lose that sale. I don't want people crossing the street to save money, so I'm going to offer them the value of price matching. And we asked consumers, how are you doing price matching? And this number floored me. 29% of Canadians said they're price matching their grocery purchases right now. Okay, so is everyone familiar with price matching? Because I think if you look at the retailers, the major retailers are doing it, it's Walmart, Real Canadian Superstore, and No Frills are the three that are the big three national guys that we're seeing a lot of price matching right now. Now, I was someone that if I saw someone with flyers in their hand in the express line, I got in the next line because I didn't want that person holding me up, sitting there checking flyers for those 8 items they're buying. So I experienced this for the first time. I had a family function back in early May. It was my brother's 50th birthday party. All the family got together. And I guess I'm the cool uncle. I was responsible for fun snacks, right? So I get up to my mom's place and live in a small town, and I'm like looking at the Shoppers Drug Mart flyer. I'm like, Lay's potato chips on for $1.88, and Ruffles and Cheetos. I said, perfect, score. I'm going to go and get that. The kids will love all that stuff, all my nieces and nephews. So I ran to Shoppers Drug Mart. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and my sister is there, and she goes, oh, can I come with you? Because I need to grab a few things. So I ran into Shoppers, and of course, it's been all picked through. There's like non-salt or low salt, and I'm like, that's not going to appeal to kids. And my sister goes, let's just go to No Frills across the street. They price match. I said, price match? She goes, yeah. And she goes, come on, amateur, let's go. So she grabbed the flyer, went across the street to, No Frills, and theoretically, I had every selection. I could buy the chunky, the Cheetos of every flavor and things like that, and same with the potatoes, because I had the full selection and variety, get to the cash, showed them the flyer, and I got it for $1.88. So that's just an example of I had to test it, and it worked, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So, I'm one of those people that have now fallen into that price matching scenario, and I took my sister to do it. But my sister has 2 children under 5, and she goes, that's the way I shop. That's the way we save money, because I don't have time to shop the deals and go to all these different stores, so I price match in order to make my time the most efficiently. And that's the way a lot of consumers are doing, and retailers are realizing the value in that as well. So those of you out there that aren't price matching, why aren't you doing it? And then we ask that as well, and what we find here is that, well, why do I price match? I'm already shopping at the store that have the lowest prices anyway. So once again, price is the number one motivator for consumers as to why they choose to shop at the store they shop at. And I see it. If I walk into a No Frills store and before I even get out of the car I get out of the car and walk into the store, I can see people coming out with, heaps of toilet paper or 20 things of Yop in their shopping cart. I'm like, well, I guess Yop's on sale because that's not an unusual purchase. So that's what people are doing right now. They're shopping the deals. They're deciding, I'm going to feed my kids hot dogs this week because that's what's on sale. And they're going out and buying in bulk, freezing products, etc. But that's the way consumers are shopping. Only 23% of it says it's not worth the time and savings. And then my store doesn't offer that program, or I just forgot the flyer, it's not worth it. So this is something that's going to continue probably to grow volume into the future as well. The other thing, too, that's impact our industry is cross-border shopping. Now, we decided to look into this a little bit because, Stats Canada put out this message about, same-day trips to the U.S. are up about 26%. Our consumer panel, like I said, Big Brother's watching. We have almost like a GPS unit on these consumers, and we track where they're shopping as well. And guess what? Cross-border trips are up 20% within our consumer panel. And how many of us are doing it? About almost 10% of all Canadian households are doing it, 7.4%, up about 22%. Now, BC, this number is almost 15%. So you guys are being hit even more so by cross-border shopping. And even though I live in Toronto and I think I'm the center of the universe, you know what? You guys are making news as it relates to what's happening with cross-border shopping. I'm very much familiar with the riots or the Costco's in Birmingham. Is it Birmingham? Is that Bellingham? Sorry, Birmingham. Bellingham, as far as what's happening with, all the Canadians going down there and hoarding the stores theoretically, and how much they're trying to say, let's do shopping days where you ban Canadians. Or shopping certain days. So I'm aware of what's going on there. And we're starting to see it even in areas like Buffalo as well, that's close to Toronto, where they're trying to do that as well. And then people in Buffalo, you don't think of Buffalo as a thriving metropolis, right? It's a very depressed area, not like Seattle probably, it's doing a little bit better. But it's a very depressed area. If you look at sales right now in Buffalo, they're actually outpacing the total US right now. So one of the growth categories in the area is liquor. Liquor sales are up 40% in the last quarter within Buffalo. Okay, well maybe if I lived in Buffalo I'd be drinking 40% more as well, but what we see right now is that the Canadian government changed the rules back in June or July last year, so it's not about $50 I can do without expenses, it's actually $200. So I've been able to change the rules, but with liquor it's still 1.5 liters. So what we're seeing now is a lot of Canadians going down and buying those premium scotches and things like that and coming in. Now if we look at the food industry, we're seeing a little bit increase in food, but nothing substantial like double-digit gains and stuff like that within some of those border cities. But we're starting to see things like face care products and diapers and vitamins, things that are a little bit more big-ticket items. We're starting to see some huge increases in the U.S. And it wasn't until I shared this thing with my presentation with my U.S. counterpart, he goes, oh, this is a big driver for a lot of retailers, and the fact that they need to probably start thinking about how they stock their product to meet the needs of Canadians just as much as they are stocking the product to meet the needs of their local trading area. So that's something that's been a huge driver of sales. How much we're spending? Almost $750 per year, 6 times a year, and the average trip is $120. Think about that as the average time you go to a Costco. It's roughly about $120 as well. That's the shopping experience that consumers are getting when they shop south of the border. Now this is consumer packaged goods, okay? Keep in mind that's the sandbox we play in. Typically, we don't track things like electronics and clothing and footwear and stuff, but we know those are the things that really consumers are heading to the US to buy, and they're picking up the groceries as well as those other things as well. So that's going to be continued to see growth moving forward. So we do have a quarterly cross-border shopping presentation that we do. Just do a little bit of plug here. It's free. That we're doing on a quarterly basis, so you can monitor this if it's something that's near and dear to your heart as well, to keep abreast of what's happening from a Canadian perspective. And in there, we get into the regional breaks as well, specific to BC. The other trend we see is dollar stores. So dollar stores, another huge growth area that we see, up 28% within Canada from a growth perspective. Now, really small, a lot of people may dismiss them and say, oh, dollar stores, it's quite small. It's only 1% share, but you know what? It was 0.5 not that long ago, so they've almost doubled their share, and it's going to continue to fuel growth. How many Canadians are shopping at dollar stores? 75% of us are doing this. Our trips are up 21%, and we're spending 16% more. So, dollar stores, typically it's those tchotchke stuff. If you're having a kid's party, you may think I go there to get the loot bags and stuff like that, and, a few things. But now we're starting to see dollar stores are getting more into the food, and a lot of manufacturers are making products specifically for dollar stores. So, your bag of Doritos, they have a $2 bag of Doritos, a smaller size that goes directly into a dollar store. So manufacturers are starting to realize, I'm going to make products unique to fit those price points that dollar stores are focused on. And it's no longer about the dollar. Obviously, you go in there, a lot of stuff is over $1. And even Dollarama within the Toronto area as well, they're putting skids of bread by the checkout. So, they're trying to get some of those other food purchases. So this is something that's going to be a huge, huge threat to our industry moving forward, because once they get into things like refrigeration and freezer, that's where we're going to see huge, huge increases in trips and potentially more focus on food as well. So right now, small threat, but it's still growing and up dramatic growth in the last couple of years. So what's this messaging that we're seeing right now from all this value stuff we talked about it? And basically what you're seeing is you no longer can afford to be middle of the road. You can't be average, okay? So I drove a really long drive yesterday, so I thought I was smart, and I went from Kelowna up to wherever to get to Whistler, but I didn't come down through Vancouver. I went up through the North Country and through some Indian Reserve. Beautiful drive. I saw a lot of wildlife, right? I saw a wolf ran out in front of me and things like that. I'm driving through these single lane roads. I think I was the only car for a while. But you know, my GPS, it did get me from point A to point B, but it was an 8-hour drive. So it was a long day for me yesterday. But you know what? I saw some animals, you know, and it's the same thing as well with that animal. The animal's on the middle of the road, the chances are you're going to get killed. And the same thing with our environment as well. If you're average, middle of the road, you're going to get killed in this new environment. So, you know, I'm challenging you out there. You really have to differentiate yourselves. You've got to figure out a way to get beyond just price. Because right now, a lot of people are just playing the price game, right? And that's an easy thing to do. If you want to grow your sales, well, I can tell you how to do it. Just lower your price and promote your products. But that's an easy way to do, but it doesn't help build share equity in the long term. Because what we're finding right now, consumers are like potentially pantry loading. You know, anything that doesn't have an expiration date, I'm going to pantry load on. So if toilet paper's on sale, guess what? I'm going to buy toilet paper. You know, it's something you never want to be without. But you know what? I buy it, I go down to my basement, I'm like, oh gosh, I got a problem here. I got a hoarding problem. I got 100 and some rolls of toilet paper, and it's just me and my household. So you know what? But then again, all my friends know if they run out, I'm the guy. So, but that's what we're seeing in this new environment. People have changed how they shopped, and we've got to figure out a way to get beyond price. So you really, really have to differentiate yourself. But we have seen some success stories in the last little while, and we can all relate to them. The coffee pods. Coffee pods have been incredibly successful, innovative, but guess what? It's innovative, but if you actually did the analysis and looked at cost per cup, it's basically doubled what it would be if you actually ground the coffee yourself and put it into the machine. But it's actually stealing that experience away from out of home, which is where they were losing a lot of their sales. Other things that are innovative as well, like Greek yogurt, another great example where you know, it's 80% more price premium, so it's 80% more expensive, and consumers are buying it. You know, when I was looking at the results, I'm going, what's the deal with this yogurt stuff? So I went and tried it. It's good. You know, if you haven't tried Greek yogurt, I'm sure you got to try it. It's very creamy, and it's low in fat, and it's good, high in protein, so has a lot of value attributes, and it delivers on taste. Because even though people are focused on health and wellness, it still has to taste good. If you're going to serve me a piece of cardboard, I'm not going to like it. I'm not going to go back to it. That's the way we see with a lot of Canadians as well. It has to deliver on all attributes. So what we're starting to see with this value-driven consumer is this polarization of not only the consumer, but also the retail environment. And what we're starting to see is that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Okay? I see it in Toronto. I also probably see it when I come out here to Vancouver as well. There's extreme kind of economies of scale when it comes to consumers. So we ask consumers, how is your personal finances doing? Are you kind of feeling better, worse, or about the same? And what we see when we look across the different income ranges, the low-income households are really, really struggling right now in Canada. High-income households are like high-fiving each other, and they're not feeling the effects at all. And those are the consumers that are back to spending to a huge degree. A good friend of mine works at BMW's head office. You know, guess what? Last year was their best sales result year, and they haven't seen any declines in sales. So the high-end market is doing extremely well. So those polarization of consumers really going to continue to dictate all the trends we see in retail. So from value to niche to service-oriented retail. So the value side is doing really, really well. And you know, we're starting to see a pop of all these little niche retailers and things that are doing incredibly well. In Toronto, there's a marketer called Summerhill Markets, and it's just pretentious shopping. You know, it's like Pusateri's and stuff like that. But guess what? They have to hire police to direct traffic in and out of the place. So we're finding very much focused on service and high prices, but it's meeting the need of that unique consumer as well. And also service-oriented. So, you know, think about choices and things like that in Vancouver. We have Longos in Ontario as well. Very much focused on the perimeter of the store to differentiate themselves. Because the center is a little bit hard to do, right? Tide is tide. But I'm going to differentiate with how I appeal to all those different consumer emotions as well when it comes to the foodies we talked about, the Food Network, and people putting more things in their basket. Oh, I saw that on TV last, I'm going to do that. But it's creating that environment that allows people to shop that and prepared foods, because guess what? We're a consumer group of heat and eat. You know, that's what we want to do. We want to have prepared meals and have it done for me, and convenience is king. So that's where a lot of retailers are winning right now on that as well. And then we're always starting to see on the premium side with private labels. So, you know, Loblaws, President's Choice, the #1 brand in Canada, they launched their black label. You know, the jury's still out whether or not it's that successful, but it has allowed them to differentiate their premium store versus their discount store, because they're carrying the same private label products in both, but the black label now is exclusive to those Loblaws banners. And then they basically cut a strip right through the entire center of the store and have unique shelving to profile all those products. But even their commercials, the thing they're trying to appeal to the foodies to get people to take those items and use it in their everyday cooking as well. So that's been something we're going to continue to see expanded growth on. And then discount versus conventional retailing, that is just going to continue to differentiate, and discounters are going to continue to grow. And we're going to continue to see growth on the premium side, as well as ethnic retailing is the other key growth area. And obviously, the Vancouver area, you're very much aware of that trend as well. Next trend I want to talk about is health. And, when it comes to health right now, it seems to be I'm more concerned about the health of my wallet than I am about the health of my body. And the concern here is that my body is getting wider and my wallet is getting thinner. Okay, so they're going in the wrong direction here. So that's not kind of what my goal is, but I want to eat healthier. Now we're all friends here. How many would consider themselves overweight? Only one. Okay, all right, good go. I'll put my hand up with that, you too, so you're not alone. Okay, so you got a lot of liars out there. Because if you look at how many Canadians actually think they're overweight right now, 60% of us think that we're overweight. Okay, so I apologize, hopefully it's not too offensive, that graphic. I was trying to figure out a way to stretch it, and the head looks a little bit whopped when I did it. But what we have here is about 60% of Canadians say they're overweight, a little bit overweight, and 60% of us are extremely overweight. So what we really right now is we do have an obesity problem. We're very much aware of the obesity problem in the US, and we hear about it within our youth today, and it's something that's going to continue to plague consumers and be a number one motivator moving forward. And, a bit of mixed message here. You're trying to lose weight, so it's split 50-50. Once again, this is a bit of an aspirational result as well because it's survey-based. So half of us are actually trying to do something about it. And what are we doing? Well, we realize, there's no quick fix. We're going to change our diet, we're going to exercise, but things that are long-term goals. And Canadians are a little bit different. You think about those fads in the US, like, the Atkins, the South Beach, all these diets that you hear that are kind of like to see the sales go up. Those things don't really materialize the same way in Canada. We take more of a balanced approach around that, which is good news for us because it's not that one-hit wonder that we're going to focus on. So changing our diet and physical exercise. So let's talk about changing the diet. What are you going to do? And this is where it impacts some of our industry as well. That think about the things, the products you make and what you sell to consumers, this is what they're looking for. They're looking for reduced fat, reduced sugar, more fresh food. And fresh food, obviously, it's more expensive particularly to buy fresh food than it does to buy some of the frozen canned products. But guess what? During the recession, produce kept going up and up and up. So people didn't trade off and switch to the cheap alternatives. They still ate healthy, but what they did, they substituted that out-of-home experience. Instead of going to a restaurant, they cooked in, and that's where we saw produce doing incredibly well. Less processed food, 52%. And then smaller portions, that's another goal of consumers. But that I've done some research. I've worked with Nestle on lean cuisine business a few years ago, and it was funny because one thing we learned about their primary consumer, we called them the heavy consumer, and pun intended there with their lean cuisine, but what they're finding, people instead of eating one, they're eating two. So the thing is, even though you do portion controls, it's good from an overall consumer perspective, but, people are still, double dipping in from that perspective. So that's been a huge trend as far as growth and new items coming in, and it's all about the calorie counts and things, but we know that consumers are having a hard time with self-control that relates to that. But the processed food's a bit of a concern for you because it's something that consumers are potentially going to try to consume less of. All right, the next one we want to talk about, it's kind of fun, and it's talking about this new connected consumer that we have. So technology is continuing to evolve at a rapid rate. Look around the room here, I see a variety of smartphones and maybe the odd person has a tablet, things like that. But how we are connecting as consumers have evolved and changed so much. Not only how do we connect with ourselves, but also we connect with our retailers, manufacturers, and how we're actually using that technology to simplify our lives. And what it had the impact on our industry is that we're starting to see this shift. Some of it's on a small scale, but it gets you thinking about where the future is going. Not that long ago, it was all about the big store. The bigger the store, the better, right? And it's like, let's open that football field and let's bring as many consumers in and offer as much choice as possible. We're starting to see a shift away from that. Even someone like Walmart, who's very much that big box guy, is scaling down the size of their stores. And what they're learning with that is that aging population, guess what? The older you get, you don't have the ability to shop the entire store. My mom's like one of those people, she's 80 years old, she's not shopping a football field. She goes, I'm going to the store where I can get in and out as quickly as I can without worrying about, making it a big exercise. And we're starting to see a smaller store trend. We're starting to see more online shopping. We talked about, no, we haven't talked about that. That's coming up. But online is actually another area that we're growing. And then we're starting to see virtual stores come into play. And in Toronto, we're having, Walmart and P&G just launched a new virtual store partnership where they're going to have virtual stores in 50 bus stops in the bus stations where you can scan the product, shop while you're waiting for the bus. Okay, so that's just a different environment. Mattel and Walmart partnered over Christmas in the Toronto subway around that. P&G did a test as well last year. So that's something we're starting to see. This virtual shopping experience is now coming to life, and that's a new growth area as well in the future. So online shopping, I talked about the fact it's a growth area. Guess what? It's up 11%. And this is really the consumer packaged goods. So once again, if I think about online shopping, I'm going intentionally. I buy a lot of clothes and things like that online because I can run to the store, try it on, figure out I'm not going to wait in line or the changing lines. Maybe it's just too annoying from that perspective, but I can go try it. And now it's the point that I can buy it online and return it to the store if it doesn't work. So it just allows that convenience factor as well. So we're seeing with groceries, it's the same thing, up 11%. And we're capturing about $1.2 billion in sales. Now this is through our panel. It's probably a little bit higher because we have a panel of 10,000 households. We try to project it out, so it's probably a little bit understated here. So it's 1 billion plus that we see that's going through online now with consumer packaged goods. So the share is about 1.2% of CPG. 30% of households are actually new. We tend to do a little bit more on the health and beauty side. On the food side, we do the health and beauty side of things, and we're spending about $272 a year. That's the average Canadian. That average spend is actually going down because of more people trying it. So it actually brings down the average. But that's going to be a continued trend as well, is that less about the bricks and mortar and more about the online. But it doesn't mean that people aren't going to go into the stores to shop anymore. You just need to have that two-pronged approach to make sure you're getting all those consumers to shop at your store versus losing 11% growth due to online shopping. The smartphone, that's going to continue to be the game changer. So how many Canadians have a smartphone right now? Well, 40% of us do, and that's up 16 points just in the last year, and it's going to continue to grow. We ask consumers, are you planning to buy one? 20% say yes. So we're going to have majority of people out there, they're going to have the smartphone technology in their hands. It gives them a lot of power, and it gives manufacturers and retailers a whole new set of connection points as well. And one of those things that are going to be continuing to change is social media. Now, social media was talked about in the introduction about how it's changing consumer connection points. We're seeing it within our industry as well. And Canadians love social media. And right now we have about 65% of Canadians that are engaged in social media. And we're heavy users of social media. About 26% of us spend about 6+ hours a week on social media. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean you're on Facebook all the time and things like that. There's other social media. There's LinkedIn. There's Pinterest. Pinterest is actually number 5, and it's the fastest growing social media site. So we're basically, Facebook would say, I like a donut. That's what I would do. I'd like donuts. But on Pinterest, it'd be, here's a donut recipe. Okay, so it's a different type of social media, and that's what we're finding on the food side. Very female skewed. About 80% of Pinterest users are female, so it's a good way to kind of make it a little bit more interactive. And I have a colleague as well. She's a heavy user of Pinterest, so I always tap into her. So what are you using it for? And she goes, my 6-year-old daughter, I just planned her birthday, read it from theme to loot bags to the type of cake to everything. I just stole the idea from Pinterest and just printed it off, and I had my checklist and shopping list for everything. And so that's where we're finding that it's becoming a little bit more engaging. So where Facebook, it's more about those consumer connections, where Pinterest is really about providing solutions and things in those connections with consumers as well. But also don't forget about YouTube. YouTube is social media. We're all guilty about, you got to share this video. It's so cool. Check this out, And that's where we're starting to find, even in Nielsen, we're starting to track with media, what does the media buy versus what does the media earn? Because you can go out and buy a lot of media, but if it doesn't go viral or doesn't, hit the desktops of a lot of consumers, then it really wasn't overly successful because people are tuning out a lot of commercials and stuff. So that's when you see the super full ads. And if you think about someone like Frito-Lay that does their Doritos ad, they actually get more bang for the buck when it goes viral and people posting on their Facebook status or sharing with friends. And that's how we're starting to measure media now, is earned versus paid media. So why do we care about social media? Well, because it's redefining word of mouth. So 1 + 1 in the social media world equals 260. Because the average person in Facebook has 130 friends. Okay? So if you have less than 130, you're below average, okay? So maybe you need to make some more friends. But anyway, but basically what we're finding is word of mouth is now becoming world of mouth. And that's where, regardless of where you live, we're connecting, we're sharing those experiences as well. And I have friends that, they've moved on, got married and moved over to Europe or stuff like that. And we're very much connected. People said, oh, social media is meaning that people aren't communicating, they're not learning how to communicate. I think it's the opposite. I think I'm communicating more with my friends and family, but it's just a different type of communication as well. And I'm very much engaged more, so I'm following what they're doing, and we're having those relationships explode because of that. And it's going across the world. So now those trends and things that people talk about in Britain that I'm connecting to, and I'll do the research here locally to find out some of those connection points. So why do I care? Why do I care about this whole social media thing? And yeah, you got 130 friends, but who cares? Well, you got to care, because now we're finding that when it comes to trust, who do you trust the most for a recommendation? It's not the commercial you see on TV. It's more about your friends and family. So now we're finding that, I'm becoming my own network. Welcome to Carman TV or Carman Network, right? And that's why Oprah opened her own network, right? Because, the thing is now they have these people that are standing on the soapbox, and they're going to go out and tell and give their point of view. And I have the power to potentially influence a lot of my friends and family, but also they have the same influence and power on me as well. So they say, oh my God, you got to try this restaurant, or oh, you got to try this recipe, this is a great solution, or something like that. So that's where, I pay attention a little bit more when a friend or a family makes a recommendation versus the commercial I see on TV. But online product reviews are very much key as well. So it's good to even find those ambassadors, people that love your product. Have you profiled them on your website? Can you get those testimonials? There's a billboard in Toronto where, now they do filter it, I'll give you that much, but their billboard is all of their tweets and Facebook likes as far as consumer testimonials. That's their billboard, and it just keeps rotating. And that's what they're putting up there. So that's the way that you can use that to influence other consumers. Now, online product reviews, that's something where, I'll use another example. It's kind of fun. In Toronto, just west part of Toronto, there's an area called Oakville, very affluent neighborhood. And there's an area called the Mummy Mafia. That's not their official name, that's what the nickname of them is. And it's these, moms that are stay-at-home moms, and, they got the young children, and they're going out on shopping, and they basically tweet and write about their experiences and things like that. So if you get the Mummy Mafia, you give them bad service, or they have a bad experience, they'll take you down, right? Because they have a lot of followers and stuff like that. But that's just an example of, they're stay-at-home moms, but, they have probably the most consumer power in the city of Oakville than a lot of other consumers of the TV, because they have a lot of followers and things like that. So that's an example of how the consumer voice continues to evolve and become stronger. How important is it? Well, we all know about Canadians' love affair with Tim Hortons. I love your coffee, but I hate your lids. And this is something that went on Facebook, and now, Tim Hortons is changing their coffee lid. I saw the press release. I haven't seen it hit the stores as of yet, but now they're moving to the coffee lid similar to what McDonald's has and Starbucks, where, and so that's just an example of how it can influence change, and manufacturers have to listen as well. Next thing we're going to talk about is diversity and aging. Those two are going to be kind of blended together from a demographic perspective. So these are demographic trends you have to pay attention to. If you're going to grow your business, it's not about going after and targeting the soccer mom. So many manufacturers said, my consumer group that you have to pay attention to and you can't ignore any longer. And this is just, even in that last census, you're starting to see those growth rates hit very, very dramatic numbers as a result. So visible minorities in Canada, we're 5 million strong today, and they're worth about $65 billion from a total retail perspective. Not talking about Nielsen, just talking about an economic power strength. And if you think about 20 years out, they're worth about 14 million. And just give you a perspective, it's about the size of Ontario. Okay, so that's the size of these consumer groups and how important they're going to be moving forward. Even if we shut the borders today, they're going to continue to grow, because guess what? Ethnic consumers, they tend to be a generation younger than the rest of Canada, and they have children, and they also have a higher birth rate and more children per household on average as well. So that's going to be the future growth areas, is those younger families on the visible minority side. And the face of the visible minority consumer is changing, where historically it's been more about a European influence, right? So even people today goes, oh, where are you from? What's your background? I'm like, well, I'm Canadian, but I mean, like, I've been here four generations, but no. So Scottish and German, that's how we kind of identify ourselves a little bit. But what we're finding now, it's all about the Asian consumer. And, you experience it by living in Vancouver. You see it, and obviously the same thing in Toronto. And so it's the Asian consumer now that's the majority of the immigrants coming into Canada. And it's interesting because I wonder how long it's going to be before Canada changes its term visible by minorities to majorities, because in some cities it's going to be the majority very, very shortly. So in Toronto, it's expected by 2017, 55% of consumers will be visible minorities. In Vancouver, it's going to be 50% as well. So that's just something that, once again, when you think about ethnic solutions and trying to target those consumers, a lot of people get overwhelmed by it. They go, I don't know how to do it. I mean, I don't have the expertise. But you know what? The best strategy to use is start local. Because the good thing about ethnic consumers, that term, birds of a feather flock together, that's the same thing with ethnic consumers. They live to pockets, they tend to have neighborhoods. So you target the consumers where they live and the stores they shop at within those trading areas, as opposed to a national campaign. Okay, it's not about that national campaign. But it is very different from east to west. Obviously, within Vancouver, it's about the Chinese consumer. That's where we see a lot of growth. But in Toronto now, what we're finding is that South Asians have surpassed Chinese. So it's India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. That's where we see a lot of growth as well. And some other ones we got to pay attention to is the Filipino community. A lot of people don't talk about that. Filipinos now are 1 million strong within Canada. And it's interesting when you look about where they're choosing to live. Like Toronto's a strong, but Winnipeg scores really high. And you're like, going from Philippines to Winnipeg? You know, that's an extreme in cultures and weather right there. But those are growth areas. And then the number one city we're going to see growth, we don't have it on the chart here because it's very small, is Calgary. Calgary is another area where we're going to see huge growth of ethnic consumers, because guess what? They have the jobs, and ethnic consumers are coming here for work as well. So that's what we see is how the landscape of Canada is going to change very, very drastically in the next few years. The next consumer group we want to talk about is clout control, and this is the one that have been in control right from cradle to grave, and that's the baby boomer. So if you think about the fact we are aging, Canada's actually aging faster than the US, and we're not aging as fast as some of the European countries, but we're aging, and that's a result of that baby boomer consumer that's moving through, and they're on the doorsteps of retirement right now. So if we go about 2030, once again, 25% of the population are going to be considered seniors. So that's going to create a whole new dynamic. So we got this young ethnic consumer on one end, and you got an aging consumer on the other. So you're going to have this polarization of consumer, two different needs, two different types of consumers, and obviously we can't ignore them. We've got to focus on those consumers quite distinctly. Are they actually worth anything? And they're actually worth a lot right now. If you just look at our consumer panel, and we just group the ages, right now they account for about 37% of all CPG sales in Canada and growing. Those are 55 plus. So that's where we see a lot of growth right now in our industry, is moving towards that aging consumer. And this does have impact, once again. If you think about the fact, you know what, yes, as I get older, I'm going to be more concerned about health and wellness. But we have the term that we're using. I'm working on a presentation right now, which is called aging in and aging out. Because as you get older, you age out of certain categories, and then you age into other categories. So OTC is a no-brainer. Yes, if you're in the medical field, you're going to do quite well with this aging population. But it does have impact on things like health and wellness trends as people try to move things out of their diet, or they just don't snack as much. And it's interesting, I worked on the liquor business as well for a period of time at Nielsen, and guess what? The older I get, the more I drink less beer, and I move to wine. You know, and that's where we've seen stats in Canada as well, where now wine is outselling beer in Canada, and that's just the nature of the aging population. Yeah, the younger people are dabbling with it well, but it's really the aging consumer that's driving a lot of those trends. But think about categories such as laundry detergent, and I had a meeting with P&G a couple weeks ago, and we're talking about this. They're going, we're not seeing growth. What's going on? I'm like going, aging population, households are getting smaller as a result of this aging population. And guess what? Seniors don't do as much laundry as everybody else, you know? Like I wore this suit today. I'm going to go home, probably leave here, and I'm probably going to change into some shorts, or I'm going to put on some clothes for my flight home. You know, I'm wearing 2 sets of clothes in one day. That's typical of my day. But, you know, seniors don't do that. And my dad, you know, he would wear that same sweater vest every time I saw him, you know? So anyway, so just repetitive behaviors. So that's going to change behaviors, not just for typical things, but also you have to think about usage of products and how it impacts the home as well. But the senior of tomorrow is very different. And, you know, meet the new boomer, you know. And once again, you don't think of your parents as that boomer. Like I'm thinking of my mom. She's 80 years of age. She's very set in her ways and not technology engaged at all. She's 80 years of age, and you know, I'm thinking about just setting her up on Facebook and started sending messages randomly to family members just to freak them out. But they just so they think my mom is with it. But anyway, so this is the example of the new seniors. So, you know, we all want to move like Jagger. I'm 44 years of age, and I was out on that mountain bike on the weekend, and it was killing me. I knew about the next day, so now I take glucosamine every day. As I get older, I'm changing my behaviors. I still think I'm young, I can do it all, but my body reminds me I'm not necessarily able to do it all. But we're very liberal, very much engaged in technology as well, and a lot of people tend to paint the brush says seniors aren't engaged in technology. Well, yeah, they are. They're very much, but from a boomer perspective, they've been the leading front on technology all the way as well. They're probably the first to get the DVDs, the first to get a lot of the new technologies as far as smartphones and iPads, etc., because they have the money. Right now, boomers control about 77% of all the wealth in Canada. So that's because they don't have the debt. They bought their houses when it was less. And a lot of parents right now are actually supporting their children. There's a term called boomerang effect. So you think Freedom 55 means retired? I think it has a different meaning now. I think Freedom 55 when they finally leave the nest. Because what we're finding right now, and this came out in Stats Canada, is the kids go off to school, then they come back after they graduate and they're living at home right now. So there's about 44% of all kids under the age of 30 are living at home. And that's changing the dynamic of the household as well. So you parents out there, where your kids are going off to school, get ready. Don't change that bedroom into a media room because it's probably going to need it in the future as well. Yeah, 5 minutes? Okay, we're good. So what are consumers trying to avoid right now as far as seniors? And this is part of the booming population. They're trying to avoid salt and sodium. Okay, remember we talked about consumers from a diet perspective, we're trying to reduce fat from a health perspective? Well, as you get older, it's more about the salt and sodium that you're trying to reduce. And that's something that's creeped into the #1 position in the last few years. Fat, sugar, all those things relating to health. And the only thing that people are trying to add more into their diet is fiber. Okay, so fiber's going in and everything else is trying to come out, and that's something that functions as you get older. And why are we doing that? Is because the most common conditions. And even though their state of mind is youthful and they're different from an attitude perspective, their body and ailments are going to stay very much common of what we see today. High blood pressure, arthritis, and et cetera. And that's something where you got to keep in mind, whether you're doing your packaging so people can read things, same with your online and media stuff, they have to be able to read it. Have you ever scanned a QR code and you kind of get on your phone, you're going, can't even read the silly thing. So that's an example. You got to keep in mind that when you're doing this media, think about who's looking at the other end. You've increased the fonts on your packaging, but you also have to increase the fonts on your media as well so consumers can read it. So let's just wrap up and talk about the things we talked about. So what are we seeing in the marketplace as far as this growing and static market, this consumer shift that we see? First of all, we have rising consumer confidence, which is good news, but once again, we have this consumer that's very, very cautious. Consumers are still holding on to their money. They're going to hold on to it for the next little while as well. So once again, that's going to be the new normal we see. Then we're going to continue to see a shift in retail from conventional. So traditional grocery store continue to shift over to discount. Discount's going to continue to fuel growth, but we're going to see this polarization that continue in the Canadian marketplace. Discount's going to grow. Premium or high-end retailing is going to grow as well as ethnic, and it's that middle ground average. We talked about middle of the road getting killed. That's continued to happen in our industry as well. And then obviously when you're communicating with consumers, it's about a dialogue. You need to make sure you're communicating with them and receiving the information back and going back and forth. It's no longer about standing and pushing your message out and then ignoring what consumers have to say. And people say, why do I care about Facebook? Why do I even care what consumers say? Think about it as probably your world's largest unaided focus group. Because when you get 15 people in a room, you think you know what you're going to ask them. But why don't you go into Facebook and see what are the triggers? What are the things that people really gravitating towards? Then you get those 15 people and you start asking the right questions to understand what consumers really want. And then we talked about the rule of aging and obesity. And that's going to continue to fuel health and wellness, both from a consumption of food products as well as from a health and beauty perspective. We continue to see a shift there. And then, we're going to see the shift from mainstream to more diversity. As the ethnic population continues to grow in Canada, it talks about the fact you need to make your product appeal to the needs of more consumers. And I think it's something interesting. It probably doesn't impact it may impact a little bit of you in the room as well, but I'm finding that a lot of our clients have shifted their marketing focus from Canada to the US. So now US is controlling the marketing for all of North America. And they don't get the Canadian ethnic story. They don't understand that it's different. They may think that, an orange ginger frozen meal is ethnic. And I'm like, no, that's mainstream. And that's something that our palates are changing because you know what? I grew up very much steak and potatoes. I grew up in rural Ontario, moved to the city, and I'm like, wow. But then again, I'm about exploring my family comes to visit, we want to go for Thai food. We want to go for Indian food because we have the best of the best food. And as a result, my palate's changing and it's influencing what I buy on a day-to-day basis as well. So with that, I want to thank you, and I think we have time for a couple questions. Okay. But here's my contact information. If you want to email me, I think copies of the presentation will make available through the association here, so they can give that to you. So I saw some people making notes, but you can check them against the hard copy. And then also check out our blog as well. So we have our website, and we also have a blog where it's our international blog. So it's not just about what trends are happening in Canada. It'll talk about what trends are happening in China, India, things that you have to be aware of as well as food manufacturing producers of those big global trends that potentially may be hitting Canada too. That's it. So thank you.
Let's give them a hand. Thank you very much, Carman. We have time for one or maybe two questions. Full 2 minutes available. Questions from the floor? Dave, you've got one?
Thanks, Carman. I have a question about the digital age. I know that in Asia and in Europe, some retailers are now taking on a digital approach to fresh product delivery. Is there a trend growing in Canada? And if not, how soon do you see that coming?
Could you all hear the question at the back?
Okay, I'll repeat the question. So
Okay.
in Asia, we're starting to see a digital trend towards buying your produce, fruits and vegetables through fresh food through online. Is it online or just through like digital, any digital form? Yeah. So we do survey consumers, and because the problem with produce, it doesn't have that barcode on it, right? So at Nielsen, we're tracking what's going through the checkout because they're scanning the barcode. Now, when we work with the retailers, most of them have product lookup codes. So we have agreements with retailers to identify all those different products. So we know if it's a bag of apples, tomatoes, etc. So we can capture what's happening in the store. But unfortunately, with our scanners, we just are capturing the things they scan. So fruits and vegetables, we're not capturing that if they do buy it online. So I know when we survey, ask them, Canadians' perspective still with fruits and vegetables, it's way down the list, like way off the radar right now, because Canadians still want the tactile feel of touch, feel, smell, and experiencing that. And keep in mind, right now we're still seeing online sales still only about 1%. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, it's probably very, very small scale. But we are making some enhancements, and we may have a better view on this because we've put together this thing called a fridge magnet. We're just launching, we have to wait to get some trend because it's still soon, where they're going to scan that they bought those fruits and vegetables, and then the retail channel could be online. So we may have an answer for that moving forward. We're aware of it, but I know on the survey stuff it's just not showing up the way that we tend to shop. Okay.
Thanks very much, Carman. Any more questions?
One in the back? Oh, I'll do that one first, yep.
Sure, yeah, just a question on value versus premium. Are you seeing any trends of consumers making a difference of like certain foods and products that are value or going to buy on TBR, and then some are making on premium? Like, what's kind of the difference there? Because I think consumers are probably...
Yeah, we can probably relate to this. There's certain things that now become commodities, right? That I won't pay full price for certain things. But, we're starting to see some categories, and so that average we saw was about 36%. We have some categories that average about 75%. Okay, toilet paper, facial tissue, laundry detergent is quite high. But then there's the ones like frozen pizza. Frozen pizza, it sells like I think 80% with some type of price cut. So we find those commodity things, seeing people that pantry load and things they can either put in my freezer or I can throw in my basement or just hoard. Those are things that people are buying on promotion, and that's because retailers are using everything now to bring people in. It used to be just the front of the flyer. That's what brought people in. Now people are reading every single page of the flyer. I'm going to shop at the store that has the most things on sale that I need for that given week, and that's what a lot of people are doing right now. But we're starting to see some categories, like it's about trade-offs, right? We're all hypocritical. I'm like, oh, I want the lowest price. Meanwhile, I stop and buy a $4 latte on my way to a Walmart, So, but you see that, we trade off to save here to buy somewhere else. And, same with the people that are complaining about price, they all have iPhones and, and all the technology stuff. So it's about trade-offs right now. I'll save here to reward myself here. But there's some categories that people, that are very, I'll use olive oils and balsamic vinegar. They're very, very kind of niche and foodie kind of things where people won't necessarily buy what's on sale. It's about the need when they're cooking at the time, and premium does come much into play as well. But there's a lot of manufacturers right now that are really struggling with brand loyalty. They had a loyal consumer before, but they've just degraded over time. And they think they have a loyal consumer, but they're not loyal to the brand. They're loyal to that price point and that sale. And that's what's keeping them buying that brand continuously. But that's not a good way to grow your business because there's a cost of doing that. And I think a lot of times, too, manufacturers, when they launch the product as a new, it goes on the marketplace, they bring out the price, and then they try to induce trial by reducing the price so aggressively that becomes the price point in consumers' mind they're willing to pay, and then it's hard for them to get them to continue to buy. But there are some unique categories. I did a presentation or analysis.
He's
of
pretty
looking
good, this guy, eh?
Oh,
He
sorry.
just keeps it going.
But there's
What
about
few
10% of the population they're considered, I call them promotional junkies. You know, like drug people. They're addicted. They can't get enough. And about 10% of us are like that.
Thanks. Give him a hand. Out of time, unfortunately, Carm. Thank you very much.